Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Geraint. For those of you who read the briefing correctly and you thought this was going to be somebody else who was far, far taller. So Geraint Davies. Geraint's not the easiest name to say. My children indeed slightly struggle with this, so they call me Daddy instead, which was, I suppose, a decent replacement. You're more than welcome to call me G instead of. So the first letter of the name. That's about as complex as it gets in England, where they look at your name and think, just go for the first letter. So either one is absolutely fine. I'm going to talk about the coach's eye, and more specifically about what are we looking for when we coach, when we're watching performances, and then how does that link into game planning. Some of the things that you've probably seen or heard so far today, I don't necessarily agree with everything that is said, and I would imagine that's going to be the case for my session. You won't agree with everything that's said and shown, and hopefully it'll just give you a bit of balance to perspectives. My perspective of the game and how it's coached and how we do what we do has changed massively over the years. And this question, I suppose, will lead you through the session. I'm not going to go into it straight away, but we will get into it pretty quick. If you were like me in that last session, you were starting, even though wonderful, you were starting to feel a little bit like your lunch had taken over your body. So what I don't want to happen is that what happened in this session. First things first, the thing that we absolutely hate doing in these sessions. Could you please stand up, find somebody you don't know, introduce yourself, and please ask one question. If there's one thing that you can get out of this session, what is it? Or one thing you really want to get out of it? Go. You got 1 minute. So, that is me. I am much, much taller in real life, aren't I? Much, much taller than I show there. Who am I? Well, my full-time job is I'm an academy lead coach. I work at Leicester Tigers, and I've been working there kind of on and off for a long time, but officially for just under a year. Former teacher, taught for 12 and a half years, and up until January, indeed, I was still teaching. So balancing coaching and the rest of life alongside teaching. Life is definitely easier in lots of ways, not being a teacher. It gives me a massive foundation, and hopefully that'll come through during the session. Also a coach developer, so actively work for the Rugby Football Union, still do the odd bit for the Welsh Rugby Union. This is actually the first thing for the Scottish Rugby Union. So it's nice to get on to a new union and see a different part of the world. And I also do a bit of rugby analysis alongside. So most people's days go between kind of 9 to 5. Mine goes between around about 6 a.m. until around about 4 a.m. And then end up with a bit of rest in between. So that's my life. And what does that then come to? Well, it comes to hopefully being able to just share a slightly different perspective. I don't try and do that outwardly. I don't try and be just different to everybody else. Just happens to be the way that I am, and I get a bit of pleasure from it as well. So what are we going to hopefully get out of it from my perspective? Well, identify rugby's big rocks, or what I believe to be rugby's big rocks, and then look at how they influence our coaching. Consider what rugby really looks like. Again, what I think rugby really looks like. You will have your own perspectives, and I want you then to compare what do we do in our own coaching, what do we do, what do we talk about, and then what does the game actually look like? And I think there can often be a disconnect between those two things. What we see on a field versus what we see actually on a weekend when we go to compete. And then this pretty essential link. Game planning into your observation, into your review. That's essentially a coach's week, isn't it? You plan, that's literally, that's your lives. You plan how you're going to play the game. You then observe, is that being done? And then we review how it was done. And then we do it all again. If we can get a real simple structure with that, I think it just makes life easier. And there's some things I picked up for the last kind of probably 18 months or so that have made a huge difference to me. You can have it all. And this is a big one. This will come right the way through. Critically analyse what we coach and why. Practically, on the grass, what are we delivering? That session plan that we put out and that hour and a half we coached our players through, like, why did we do it? Does it have any impact on performance? And definitely, while I spend most of my life disagreeing with what Eddie Jones says, and actually get a bit of pleasure from it, this just makes so much sense. Clarity is the new clever. What does clarity mean? Clarity means keep it really simple. If the messages you get from this session seem, oh, bloody hell, that was so obvious. If you leave with those kind of words, I'll be a very happy man. If it seemed obvious and it's really simple, I have done my job. because that is what's actionable.
I know that, but it's still rather pass a kid and don't agree with anything that man says.
Well, maybe this could be, well, tell you what we could do, just wipe out the Eddie Jones and then forget. Just like me and there instead. So, we'll definitely base our thoughts on there. Over to you at this point. Rugby's big rocks. I want you to think about your last few coaching sessions, maybe 2 or 3 coaching sessions. Either on your whiteboards, then they've got whiteboards on your table where you could collaborate and get a bit of what do you think overall, or in your own notepads. What were the things you spent the most time on? Top 3 things you spent the most time on. If it's a 60-minute session or a 90-minute session, what were the things you spent the most time on? Catching and passing, as an example. So the games we've seen outside with Fletch, I reckon probably 98.99% of the sessions where there was a catch-pass element in there. So a lot of the time would be spent on that. There's a bit of kick in there as well. Contact, there's an element, bit of shoulder on. It's probably, 5% of that session was contact-based. Off you go. Together. So let's go with this back table for me. Give me one thing you spent lots of time on. In your sessions, one thing you spent kind of a decent amount of time on in your sessions?
Mine was physicality, trying to get physicality into it, because I coach girls rugby.
Yeah. And you talked about one-on-one tackle within that?
One-on-one, yeah. One-on-one, using I call it the 7 o'clock tackle. Trying to get them to be physical and know that it's not going to be crippling every time.
Okay, so you did some tackling-based work to develop that. Thank you. Guys, for yourselves?
With 3 different ones, Geraint, but the one that I put in was getting width, because as a coach under 17s, and we looked at some of the games that we played, and we always score in those 2-15 channels. So we sort of always now do a game session based on getting width the ball, whether that's passing, whether that's double movements up second phase, whether it's a kick. So we always work on getting the ball wide.
Cool. Good. Thank you. Mr. Moore?
Well, we agree with you, but the catch pass being probably one of the things that we do nearly all the time, just in the game.
Yeah.
But we had 2 or 3 others.
What was it? Give us one other.
Attack structure.
Attack structure. Cool. Yeah. So we've got physicality through tackling. We've got attack structure, catch pass. Give us one more that you didn't talk about.
Structured games.
Unstructured games. Cool. Let's go middle table.
Evasion drills and tackling skills. We've pretty much got all of what everybody else is talking about, both senior and junior level, but that's one of the things that's not really mentioned.
Good. Thank you. And then last group.
I think the ones I've not mentioned, creating space maybe, but we had catch pass, confidence in the tackle, gameplay.
Okay. So a good amount of consistency at room actually with the type of things that generally fall into our sessions. And now I want you to consider this. So up there are what I would call instances, things that happen within the game. And we can count instances. So you've got the action of the instance of kicking the ball. We've got line out or restart. What is it? I got it wrong. It's 50-50 chance. That's actually a restart. It doesn't matter. So we've got kicking the ball, we've got restart, you've got passing the ball, we've got tackling and carrying, and so on. So we've got lots of different instances of the game. I want you to consider this question. What are the top 3 most common instances in a game at your level? So school, club, whatever it is, what are the top 3 most common instances, as in the things that happen the most in a game? Passing, kicking, rucks, tackling, restarts, scrums, line-outs. What are the top 3? Off you go. I'll give you 40 seconds maximum. What's your list?
Kick-offs happen a lot in our games.
Yeah.
So we score and concede a lot of tries. So catch and pass is probably taken care of with
Cool.
someone else in it. So kick-offs happen a lot in our environment.
Okay. Because a lot of tries being scored.
Yeah, but we spend a bit of time on it as well, because sometimes they don't get it in the environments that we get across.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Okay, from the groups I've seen so far, there's a lot of consistency. Now, this question, my coaching, pretty much in its entirety at one point in my life, was based around the answers to this question. And I suppose, led down a path of certain things happen not a great deal in a game. So why do you spend so much time on those things? So as an example, kind of scrums generally at that point in time, there's probably between 5 and 10 scrums per game. And the question was, why are you spending so much time on scrums that you don't get many of them? kind of try scoring, not massively heavy try scoring, so you're probably getting 4 to 5 restarts per game, and then the ball generally was on the field. It'd be an error rather than the ball being kicked off, so not a massive number of lineouts either, probably between 8 and 10 lineouts per game. So the question on set piece was, why are you spending so much time? And I went down a route where I spent loads of time on all the other stuff. I said, well, transition is where we spend most time, and the word time, I'm going to come back to in a minute, spend most time in the game in transition. So in that case, why don't you spend more time on transition? You spend, there's more passes in transition, and there's more phases on a transition than there is in any other part of the game. That's a fairly decent fact, regardless of level. This is what an under-17 academy fixture looks like in terms of those numbers. 193 passes, 28 kicks. This is a particular fixture, by the way. I picked this one because it's pretty typical of the picture at under-17s level. So numbers that really stand out, those big ones. So if you compare to your lists, there's a decent chance you've got a lot of passing on your list. So you talked about it. There's a decent chance you've talked about some breakdown work and some rucking, and there's a decent chance you've talked about some tackling within your work. So those are the things that happen the most. This is the question I'm not going to answer straight away, but I do want you to consider it. So does this mean you should now spend your time on passing, tackling, then rucking? I want you to log that thought. You'll have an answer to that in your mind. In fact, you've given your answers on your whiteboard. So I think we're in line with where most time in your sessions is being spent. Now I want you to consider something different. A rugby timeline. So you're going to watch a video in a moment. I'm going to change this over to play it through QuickTime instead. So you're going to watch the video, and then I want you to record a timeline of events in whatever way. So your coaches, treat this game now as you're the coach of this team, and you're going to record a timeline of events in whatever way you want. There is no right or wrong with this, and whatever I come out with at the end doesn't mean that I'm more right than you are. We might well just have the same perspective, might have a different one, but we will certainly have moved from where we are at this point in time. So get yourself a piece of paper if you haven't already, or something that you can note on, and get yourselves ready for a bit of timeline. Now I have sped this up a little bit, so do brace yourselves. So it is La Rochelle against Racing 92 from last week. So I want you to record a timeline in the simplest way. Clarity is the new clever. Simplest possible way. I will stop it as we go. So I've done it as clip A, clip B, clip C, and clip D. There's 4 of them. A, B, C, and D. So that's how you might well label them initially. So, timeline events. Here we go. And easy to touch. Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds or so just to refine your list of the timeline you've just seen. Okay, clip B coming up. La Rochelle threw in, by the way, and lost the ball. Ball's going into touch. I'll give you a few seconds to refine. Okay, clip C. They go back for the penalty. The kick to the post. This isn't one of the clips, by the way, just to show you these are all one event after another. I'll give you a few seconds before I show you the final clip. Okay, clip D, 4th and final. Okay, knock the ball on the contact. Whistle goes, ends up with a scrum. So I'm going to give you probably a minute or so just to compare notes with somebody. How have you recorded your timeline? What things really stood out for you? And what this is your coach's eye. So you've watched the game. What things really stand out for you? What really matters when you're observing performance to then be able to influence performance? So with somebody, just compare your notes. Right, everybody. So right at the start, we talked about how hopefully this will enable you to be able to look at the game in a really simple way, that it takes our game planning into our observation and then into a review, and that review then leads into new game planning. So that cycle constantly continues. Now, the way that you've just recorded it probably reflects how you see the game. And in a moment, we're going to reflect back over what you coach in your sessions, and indeed what those instances are, and try and get some real clarity from it. So this is how I would record a timeline from it, or how I have indeed. So A, this is how I record the timeline. It started off with a kick-off, or otherwise known as a restart. I then saw a kick. I saw one phase carried into touch. So Finn Russell carried the ball into touch. That then results in another line-out. The process from that, we then had that line-out, but it was a turnover at the line-out. We then played one phase, kicked into touch, leads to another line-out. Clip C started with that line-out. They played one phase and were turned over, the counter-ruck at the ruck. There was a penalty given. They then went for a kick, a goal at the end of it. And then D, much, much longer phase, but still the same system of recording. So start off with a kick-off, resulted in a kick immediately, then played 7 phases, knocked the ball on, and then ended up then with a scrum at the end of it. So a real simple way of putting the game together. And what really stands out for me is then, how does every phase of play in rugby union start and finish? With a set piece. Sounds really obvious, isn't it? Clarity's new clever. Real simple stuff. I asked this question to under 17s. We had a camp about 6 weeks ago, and I asked them, put down a timeline of rugby union. And we had, 56 players on this camp. And all those 56 players in the different groups, how many groups came up with set piece being the start point? 0. And the 16 players, some of them could be Premiership players in literally 2 years' time. Not a single one put set piece down as their start point. They didn't value set piece. They just didn't see it. And yet it's the start point of the game. And when you score or do anything else, you're then going to have another set piece. So they didn't see that link. So the type of things they put down as their start points of the game was tackling. So a game starts at a tackle. It definitely doesn't. Definitely doesn't. Somebody put the ball into scrum first. That definitely happened first. Other things that really stand out to me is then the phase aspect. So how many phases? Now, what was that linked to? Think about the passing metric. That was the highest incidence, wasn't it? When were the most passes made?
9 to 10.
In D, what happened in D?
Multi-phase.
Something else happened, really important. Gregor talked about it, in fact. There were? Because it was from transition. So the one from transition, the one where the ball stayed in play and could stay in play, then we had more phases. So the passing metric, most rugby union is played between phases 1 to 3, regardless of the level you coach at. That is a fairly standard fact. Phases 1 to 3, the most rugby is being played. Most tries are scored on phase number 1. Best source of tries in rugby union is the line-up maul. So what does rugby actually look like? Another thing that really stands out for me is kick. Fletch talked about it pretty much throughout his session with the players outside. Kick is a huge part of the game. And another huge part of the game is penalties. For me, penalties are one of the biggest impactors on performance. And the team that can be really disciplined got a decent chance of winning. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, we'll talk about how it then influences our coaching and what we coach. So come back to that question of the big rocks. What are my big rocks? My big rocks are, number 1, set piece and strike. Now, what does that do in my own coaching? You will all train for various times. In the summer programme, I will get 3 hours, 3 times a week with the players. 1 hour of that is spent on S&C. 40 minutes of that is spent on set piece. 20 minutes is in a team meeting, which is about the social and cultural aspect of our get-together. And then 40 minutes is spent on actual rugby. 20 minutes is on individual development. So 40 minutes of that is on kind of what you would perceive to be a normal rugby session. Because set piece is pretty important. That gets a full 40 minutes in those days. And when we train, sorry.
Can I ask, what do you mean by individual development? What's your sort of thought process on that, if you mind me asking?
So that would be the kind of positional stuff that doesn't necessarily relate to somebody else as much. So I'll take the scrum halves. The scrum halves will have time on just their passing in context. They look at their box kicking. We look at their movement away from a ruck. We look at their ability to tackle in the backfield and put them under real pressure. Stuff that they find themselves in, but our second rows just don't find themselves in that position. Our full backs, getting off the ground, catch, high catch, real specific positional stuff.
Thank you.
And generally in kind of small groups. It's rare that they'll be on their own for that. Next up is phase play. Now, phase play for me is anything beyond, dependent on kind of what your rugby looks like, beyond second phase. So first and second phase for me is the set piece and strike. Beyond that then becomes phase play or immediately from transition. So when you receive the ball immediately, we're into phase play. And that's where your shape of 9, shape of 10, all that type of stuff starts to come in. Another big rock is the kick game. This is not a new phenomenon, by the way. There's less kicking in elite rugby now than there was 10 years ago. And there's less than there was 20 years ago. It's just better, dependent on your perspective. So kick, massive part of the game. Because of that, it influenced my coaching. I'll talk about that in a moment. Another one is the contact area. So we wouldn't have had those phases if we didn't have the contact area. So there's an ability, and this is both sides of the ball, by the way. All these are both sides of the ball. This isn't just attack or defence, it's both. And then the fifth one, of course, is penalties. And because they are my big rocks, they influence everything that I coach. And influence when I'm passioning time on a session plan, how much attention needs to be paid to certain things. Well, I make sure that we are covering these areas and we're explicitly coaching those areas.
So the penalties part, is that avoidance of?
Oh, massively. And indeed, winning some. So one of our scrum strikes is 100% to win a penalty. I have no apologies for that. So we have a simple scrum strike. You've probably seen it before. You have a left side scrum. You play to the right-hand side, and you play straight back to the left. What are we doing that for? Catch them offside. Simple. Why do we do that? When we're under real pressure, I think we've been in Leinster yesterday. In your own 22 for 15 minutes, you're desperate to get out, finally get a scrum. We are not going to take time over this. We want to get out of this space, and the most efficient way of just doing it right now is to win a penalty, because that's kicking to touch. They're just going to attack us again. We're knackered. Like we can't do it. We need the set piece. So that's there for that type of situation.
So does that where the justification comes from the squint feet and all this?
So again, sorry.
Is that where the justification comes from the squint feet?
Well, you could argue that. That's a different conversation. So things like rolling away in the contact area. So when I don't teach tackle, we teach hit and roll, because they are two together. When I coach the contact area, if a player's off their feet, they get penalised in training. Like even if it's a 2v2 practice and this player's off their feet, penalties is a key rock of our performance. So if they're going off their feet in that environment, they need to know that it's illegal, because that will mean that we lose 30, 40 metres up the field. That gives them a throw-in, and that then gives them a catch and drive. So the big rocks all link to each other. What does this mean for our game planning in that case? These would become my type of questions I would ask as my planning pillars. So I would be thinking about, with the game plan, what's our focus as set piece? So on the graphics that go to the boys on a Monday morning, pre-Monday evening training in our match week, these are the type of things that we would be asking ourselves in our coaches' meeting. What's our focus as set piece this week against this particular team? So, for example, it could be we're going to use loads of 6-mans this week. And we're going to really focus on centre field because it's a big rock of our performance. We need to be really explicit about talking about it. We'd also be thinking, what's our kick game look like? So, for example, some teams are long and on, as an example. So they'll kick long up the field, no competition. They just want to get as far as they can, but they want the ball in play. Some teams are kick to compete. But you've got to be really clear on that. I'd be thinking about what our objectives are in an attack. So kind of game plan-wise, are we going to try to play to the edges? Are we going to try and play through them? Are we going to play very little? Again, some teams think actually it's better not to have the ball. There is a fairly strong feeling in rugby union that it's generally better to not have the ball. And to be fair, the stats do support it. So the teams who kick the most, win the most, is another Eddie Jones quote, 2 in one session, unbelievable. So another Eddie Jones quote, the teams who kick the most, win the most, actually is backed up by pretty strong facts, that one. And you might also then think about your defence. When I say two pass maximum, I mean the opposition. So that might be our game plan, is that we are going to go so hard and we're going to stop them from making any more than 2 passes. So you look at a team like La Rochelle, who want to move the ball, want to get the ball to those big strong runners. Well, let's not focus on tackling the big guy. Let's not let the ball get to the big guy. So that might be a focus defensively. And how are we going to stay disciplined? It might be that we're just going to focus on tackle roll. And that then guides focus this week. That, for me, then becomes what we are coaching. So I'm not just coaching tackling anymore. I'm now coaching, we're going to tackle low. Why do we tackle low? Well, one, it doesn't make sure we don't get red carded, but it's a damn sight easier to roll when you tackle low. Why are we doing that? Because we don't want to give penalties away. No, there's a thread going through our coaching. I'm not just coaching tackling anymore. I'm really guided as to how does this influence our performance. So when I'm watching my team and they've given away 6 penalties, and literally I'm observing gameplay, as a coach, for my mind, you've got to be absolutely aware of what those penalties are for, every single one of them. So in my coaching notes, the key things I'm recording, as a group we're recording, is set piece success. When we've thrown into 4 line-outs, I want to 100% know, it was a 5-man, we won all 3 of them. The 4th one was a 6-man, we lost that one. We need to keep an eye on this. So the next couple of line-outs, they've got another 2 6-men, and they lose both of them. As a coach, I don't think I would do my job if I didn't know that and can feed that back to them maybe at half-time. So I'm observing set piece. I'm observing penalties. 3 of the penalties for not rolling away. How do you correct it? Roll away. What else can you do to correct it? Guys, there's 3 penalties for not rolling away. How are we going to solve the problem?
Tackle low.
Simple. Clarity's the new clever. Be real simple. Guys, you're not rolling away. I could say that a million times. It's not bloody helping. Right, we're going to tackle low. Massive emphasis. And the terminology that we use, we say knock knees. So when we say, we don't actually say tackle low, we say knock knees. Because if you can tackle high and knock somebody's knees together, you're some kind of genius. So it's a principle-based coaching.
How would you approach it then if your guys are getting penalised for not rolling away, but there's no way for them to be able to do that because they're smothered and they're getting penalised for not rolling away? You see that quite a lot in games. How would you kind of approach that with guys for get them to try and show that they're making an effort?
Well, they've got to be fast to do it initially. They might be lifting their shoulders. A lot of players, if you try and get your players to roll, by the way, that's a good experiment for you. I guarantee you they'll try and sit up. So observe that. Are they sitting, when they make a tackle, do they try and sit up, try and get out of the way? And that's when they get jammed in. So then talk to them, shoulders to floor. So when I'm coaching rolling, we say shoulders to floor. What does that mean? That means keep your shoulders on the floor and roll with your shoulders on the floor. It's a damn sight quicker. And it's really hard for some burly second row to grab onto you if you're literally on the ground. You'd have to be on the ground with you, wouldn't you? So simple things to kind of correct. So those then become the things that we coach. So they kick. I explicitly coach kick chase. We don't just talk about we're going to kick long and on. We coach the kick chase. We coach where we want people and make it really, really simple for them. Two of the most common things the boys will call when we can do a kick is one person will be saying he's going for the ball, everybody else is in a wall. Ball, wall. Sounds really simple, doesn't it? So they all understand it, and they do it. And lo and behold, when they run up together, they are forming a wall. Like it's really simple stuff, and then relates to the way that they then play. So, this question might then be useful for you. I find this question really helpful. And these are questions that we ask ourselves in that pre-competitive week. How are we going to win? Or you could change the word win for perform or score. What are the things that we've got to do to be able to do that? And we say, well, this week, genuinely, how are we going to score points? Well, we're going to score points from our line-up maul. So our line-up maul, therefore, needs focus. So that might be something we discuss in a week. Then we say, well, how on earth are we going to get a line-up maul in a position to score? Can we impact that? Like, well, yeah, I reckon we can. How are we going to do that? Well, there's this scrum play that we've got that can win us a penalty, potentially. Or there's this, we're going to put them under masses of pressure, and we're going to force them into a position that gets us in a good position. And what does that look like? Well, we then look at what's our first phase strike of a line-out. So we talk to the players know that, do they understand what that looks like? So we then might look at a 6+1 line-out. 6 people in the line-out, one person as an insert. That insert is like a fake maul. This person then breaks away, and that gives us gain line possession. That might be what allows us then to kick on the front foot. Ball trickles out into touch. They do a line-out. They kick it into touch. We've now got a line-out in their 22. Right, we can score from a maul now. So thinking about how we're going to win and things that are going to be effective for us completely change our training week and things that we put real emphasis on. Also because of the opposite. What would mean that they win? So check out. When you're playing a game, what would mean your opposition win? They perform better than you.
They win a penalty count.
Good. So where will we potentially give away the most penalties in a game? So in the breakdown. So that's breakdown is an area that we're going to be really focused on. We're talking about rolling away. Another area give penalties away in the breakdown, other than rolling away? What type of things? See? Not releasing. So how do we solve that?
Release.
Got to get there before that. So then you talk about your support play. So you the term like bullets at ruck. So that might be what you say, or race over the ball. So in your game plan document, or that little graphic you sent out in the week earlier, where you've got 3 key points on, it might be as simple as we're going to 6-person line out. This is one thing, one big focus here. This is going to be really, really good for us this week. It might be that we're going to race over the ball, or bullets in place. Real simple stuff, and that's just guiding their thought of what it is that they're going to do. So when you've gone through that, you then got to consider all the other things you've talked about. So what's their catch-pass capacity like? Can they do it? You want to get the balls to the edges. They're not going to do that if they can't pass. You're going to think about, we're going to put them under real pressure with our carry game. Like, can they do that? Can they carry the ball really effectively into contact? If they can't, then you've got to be able to either adapt or coach those behaviours. So knowing what you want your game to look like, then guide your attention as to what you then end up coaching as a result. What does that look like in terms of principles? Well, let's have a look at another bit of video. So you're going to see Northampton Saints versus Loughborough Lightning from the Allianz 15s. A game from last weekend in the glorious sunshine. It's from the end-on angle, so you'll hopefully be able to see it okay. And you're going to see these type of principles coming together. You're going to see a set-piece strike. You're going to see clear kick game. You're going to see clear defensive principles, and you're going to see clear attacking principles. So the big rocks of performance. What we won't get lost in is the detail. Because what coaches often want to do, and I've definitely been really guilty of it, is want to just dive into the detail. Want to look at every single detail of what we're seeing actually. Probably better off stay really chunked up. And once we've chunked up, we can then go back. And we'll talk about what that looks like after we've gone through. Okay, so Loughborough Lightning. This is actually the first team I ever coached, Loughborough Lightning. So they are back in their own 22. Or they're just outside 22. Implications for performance?
Looking for an exit.
Quite possibly. What's an exit mean?
Get rid of it.
This will mean different things to you all. The reason I asked that question is that you need to be really clear, and your players need to be really clear as to what exit means. For me, this is an exit environment, but my philosophy is that players always have 3 options, always, regardless of where we are on the field. And those 3 options are really simple, obviously. Run, kick, pass. They have those options all the time. And I am explicit with the players, they have those options. What changes is how long we are willing to spend doing those things. That definitely does change, and the players are 100% clear. When we are back there, we are not going to run, kick and pass 20 times. We're not doing that. And there's one simple reason, is that we're not in a position to score if we're doing it 20 times. You get 0 points for it. And I really like scoring points, because it's so much better than losing games. So much better. Like, it just feels better. So scoring is quite cool, and there's try lines all the way up there. So we're not going to spend multiple phases back there. So clear principle is minimal phases there. Run, kick and pass, go for it. But we're not going to do that 20 times, because you get 0 points. So let's have a look what Loughborough Lightning do on their first phase. So think back to those big rocks. So first thing, what are they going to do first of all? Win the scrum. If they don't win the scrum, what happens? So therefore, scrum's actually quite important, isn't it? So all of a sudden, it's not a 5-minute job anymore. I'm saying, actually, this doesn't matter, because if you don't win that scrum, and you give a penalty away, what do the Saints do? Get a penalty, what are they going to do? And then they're going to get that stat in their favour, that one phase try most common, line out being the most common, line out maul, and they're just going to score in the corner. Well, so a set piece is important. Our scrum is important. So they have a pre-planned strike. And this is what I would call a 40 scrum. 40 means that they're attacking the 40 zone. So the 40 zone being there. So if this is the 15, middle of the pitch would be the 50. Between those two is the 40. So this is a pre-planned strike play. So, and what does a pre-planned strike play do? Well, it gives you pre-defined support. Everybody knows they're on the same page. Are they trying to get tackled? Yeah. And set up a phase? I don't coach players to try and get tackled. I literally had a review with a player last week, and my top point for him, real kind of insightful point, was, don't let people tackle you.
So he's going to expect, they're going to expect it. So the angle they're running, the expectation is the opposition will make the tackle.
Oh, absolutely. But I don't want them to.
If they don't,
I don't want them to. And I definitely am explicit with players. We know what our outcomes are going to be. Our best outcome is that we do score. So our set principle, top of the list, is play to score. All the way through. Play to score. So when this play is being run, I want them to run it with absolute vigour. I want them to use footwork. I want them to use evasion and try and take people on and not just accept the tackle. So she's taking them on, using some footwork. And because she's done that, she's gained an extra 2 metres in the contact. So set piece, strike. Clear where everybody is. Everybody knows where they're going, still trying to beat them. And really quickly, ball goes back to 10 kicks. Now we talk about kick principle. So their kick principle is kick to grass. So they're not saying they're going to kick the ball to touch. Why do they not want to? Because they don't want Saints to have a line-out strike. So they're not going to give them that. They're going to force them to play. So they're going to kick to grass, really clear, all through the week. What are we practicing? We're practicing kicking the grass. So we don't spend 20 minutes stood trying to kick the ball to touch and be really accurate, because we're not going to do it. Coach them to kick onto the grass instead. And then the defence principle is we're going to chase to hit. So we're going to chase as a group, and we're going to aim to make a hit. So if you notice, these Lightning players, so across there, they chased as far as they could, didn't they? And they got to a point where they couldn't chase anymore. That's been coached, doesn't it? It sounds obvious, isn't it? But you've got to coach that. You can't just be coaching players to be chasing and chasing and chasing and not to manage their feet. They're just going to get beaten. So they've now going to go into, you can imagine this as a practice. kind of stick some corners down there, this becomes a practice, isn't it? This is literally a training event. You've got 2 players on the outside, they got 4 players, go and stop them defence. What do the defence do? What would you do? Just slide across, don't you? Yeah. Real nicely defended. That's quality defence. Ground gained? 30 or so metres. So I haven't got possession, but we knew that because we were kicking the ball away. But we've gained territory, and we're now going to think about what's our next principle. Well, now it's about race the punch. We're going to get off the line, and we're going to hit their shapes. We're going to try and break their shapes because we know they're going to play a shape off 9, and we're going to try and break that shape as quickly as we can. So they set themselves. Job done. 1 gain line initially. Next phase. Spacings, pretty decent. What are they going to try and do? They're just going to break their shapes. They're going to have a shape of 10 probably. So they're going to chase up the line. Break their shapes. Again, this is your, what does practice look like? Well, hopefully it looks a lot like this. Going to set them off an edge ruck. So this game now is going to be an edge attack game. We're going to play a set ruck on the edge, and we're going to play, you've got 5 phases to score. Defence got 5 phases to get the ball back. It's a real simple setup. Defence seeing opportunity, or attacking opportunity. Get a line break. Notice the situation is slightly different to what it was before. The defensive system is going to be exactly the same. Massive line break. 2 players on the outside. What are they going to do? Just going to slide across and make the tackle, like they did in the first one. So these kind of micro behaviours. This is what we're coaching. So this is what my sessions look like, is these micro situations set up where they've got 2 players in outside channel, we've got 2-on-2 cover across, or 4v2s, 4v4s. So they manage to get across, just about make their tackle, and because they make their tackle, actually they win the ball back. And now they're back into the 22. What's their principle? Well, we want to get out of there, and we've still got run, kick, or pass. What would you do right now? Run, kick, or pass? Why? Transition. It's transition. What a massive opportunity. I say to the players, like, don't waste this. This is golden. You've got the ball back. I don't care where you are. This is run, kick, or pass. What's best in this situation? Well, take transition. If we were up in their 22 or ours, at the same mindset. Transition ball, let's have a crack at it. What do from it? Well, they get loads of ground. And now we've got about, what's our ruck focus? Our breakdown focus, race over the ball, rob. We've got to rob. What does that drive? Intensity from support players to get over the ball. And now, they're literally just trying to move the ball to where they think the most space is. Run, kick, or pass still. Get loads of ground. All the way up into the opposition 22. They get there, and this is pretty common, isn't it? So now their principle has gone slightly different. They've gone to now knock the wall down. Whereas knock the wall down means knock the wall down is between the 15s, and they're just going to hammer the wall. Whether you agree or not, they are clear on what they are doing. Now the people off it, they're looking for opportunities. So notice they're really active off the ball, looking for opportunities. So they don't mind if they make 1 centimetre at a time and take 98 phases. They don't really mind. They just want to get over the line. Unfortunately, they don't score, and it ends up with a set piece, because that's predictable. The game will always then relate to another set piece. So we've seen the game kind of hopefully linked together with some fairly consistent themes. So the game has started with the set piece, obvious. In that case, when we're coaching, and this is, I can only give you my experience. I went through a full season, my worst season of coaching ever, where I was adamant with the forwards coaches, you don't need loads of time on line-up, you don't need loads of time on scrum. We're just going to be the best transition team ever. Well, lo and behold, we had to be. Because we didn't win any line-outs, we didn't win any scrum. So you got to be pretty bloody good in transition, but it was actually transition into defence that we were spending our time on. Our opposition, where were they scoring their tries? First phase strikes and line out bloody mauls. All game long, literally being driven over, and this is no joke, driven over from outside our 22. Because we didn't spend any time on it, well, obviously. It's so obvious when you think back. So the big rocks of performance. Set piece, that's going to lead you then into think of this as a knock-on order. So you will always start with set piece. Our set piece always leads into phase play, potentially, depending on how your ruck goes, and that's where the contact area is pretty important. The kick game will also do that. You've also then got penalties. Those are the big things. So watching a game of rugby, and I'm looking at how we were up on their 5 metre line, now we're back in ours. How did that happen? You don't want to look too far, have you? What happened at the set piece? What happened at the kick? What happened at the breakdown? That's where you would look. And by looking at that, I can then directly influence performance. And if I didn't look at them, I'd think, what's our tackle like, or what's our carry like? Those things are important, but I would start with the big rocks and then drill down after that. Over to you. Any questions that have popped up in your minds?
Geraint, step forward, I'm an under-17 coach, and most of the other ones are maybe adult coaching it, but when you speak about the levels of transition and the level of complexity, before we start the next season, what would be your sort of key thought processes for the younger generation, the way the game's developing? We spoke about from Gregor earlier on. What would be some of those rocks? Are they exactly the same in the adult game, the younger game? Is there a differential? Is there an influence as a coach that I need to start thinking about now for the next season? The thought process that?
I start talking about those type of things in the last month of their under-16 season. Before that, as an academy, you actually do set piece. Before that, to be honest, we do loads of kind of defence, attack, more generalised, and then we talk about play the ball to space. We talk about speed the ball from the ruck. Actually, very similar to what Gregor was talking about. Those would be more generalised principles earlier on. But a big thing for us is that when they come into our 17s environment, loads of them change positions. So if we spent loads of time on our loose head scrummaging and our 12 catching and passing, actually loads of our 12s become props. Like that's the reality. In fact, all of our senior props currently were 9s and outward. They've all been transitioned. So it's slightly different in that kind of environment. But yeah, I keep it pretty simple. Most basic principles for kind of under 9s and the 10s, width and depth. Like I absolutely hammer those two concepts. Like, can we get really good width as a team? Can we get really good depth? That then allows us to put context or catching and passing and so on. So yeah, really simple, built up. They become the rocks for me right at the end of under 16s.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Anything else?
You talk about how, obviously the fact is that the game is going to restart with the set piece. How do you layer that into training with younger age groups that don't do set piece? So you're under 9s, under 10s, all the way up like your S1s, and I don't know what the rules are here in Scotland, but down in England anyway, they don't introduce scrums at the moment with under 12s. So how do you layer that in?
How do they start?
Well, yeah, how would you do it in training? If we're going to start with a set piece, but we don't actually do, or they didn't because of coronavirus just there, how would you layer that in to restart the game?
As in when you're starting to do set pieces, when that becomes first part of the game?
If you're playing a training game, what advice would you give then if we're going to start the game rather than a tap pass? You want to get them used to start from a set piece.
We even at under 18s level, and indeed with the senior guys, we'll start with 1v1 scrums. And we'll start with 2v1s and so on. So we definitely do loads of that. We start with, if our hookers are going to get good at throwing, we've got to get them to throw. So we'll do uncontested, like actually fetched it outside, even in the middle of the field, an uncontested 3-person line out and get the hooker to nail it. And start games that way.
All right, fine.
Loads of high catches, kind of the things that backfield players don't get as much time on. We start with restarts. Again, sounds really odd. We start games, we restart, because they don't get that much practice otherwise. This is real simple, make it important. If it's not important, they don't do it. How do you make it important? Well, if there's no consequence to you going into contact and not having any support, then why would you support it? I wouldn't. It's too much effort. No need is there. So if it's important, so most games we play have got a contested ruck in. Very few. So we don't do any touch rugby, and we do very little that has an uncontested ruck. And why do we do that? Because we actually want our support to be absolutely on it, and we treasure the effort it takes in. So we talk about effort, or in fact, again, one of the things we mentioned is off-the-ball efforts. We talk about that all the time, and really, really reward it. So make it important. If you're not going to lose the ball at ruck because there's no support, then it's not important enough. So why would you support it?